Welcome back viewers, ladies, gentlemen, non-binaries and anyone with ears or other sound detection organs. Hope you enjoy. We are continuing with Going Native, written by Uncle Sealing.
Going Native, Chapter 18. The past couple of weeks had been a bit of a blur. 2 days after the arrival of Agent Celia, Marin had received unexpected orders, a lateral promotion that had her doing data analysis for Controller Celia, trying to identify the shocking wastes of resources she had found in her latest budget reports. In reality, Marin spent all of her time at the observatory, working remotely. When Marin explained how she tracked Celia, the interior agent was suitably impressed. She also seemed horrified that a single person was able to unravel all her subterfuge and figure her out. The fake identities, the extra blackmail she had used to ensure the silence of the Marine shuttling her around, it had all meant nothing to a single nerd with a computer and, what was the human expression? An axe to grind. Now Marin's talents were being spent trying to determine exactly how the massive cargo ship Goddess's pockets, and who named these things, had been blown nearly in half. Oddly enough, most of her help in that regard was coming from Samuel. The Sams had loaned Marin a desk and moved it to the planetarium, a space she was sharing with the small male. He spent all his time with his headset and gloves on, often foregoing sleeping and eating to continue his work. Marin suspected that Sammy had put her in the room to keep an eye on their husband and make sure he didn't work himself to death, which honestly Marin was more than happy to do. Watching Samuel work was like watching a dance, and he copied one of his work screens onto the dome so she could see exactly what the unusual man was doing. Marin didn't think the Sams knew how blatantly illegal Samuel's work was. Then again, they might know and just not care. It was hard to tell. Agent Celia had given Samuel all the data he had asked for on that particular ship, the structural properties of the armor plating and steel ribbing, the layout, shipping manifests. A lot of it was classified and all of them, Celia included, could be executed just for sharing it. What Samuel had done with the information, however, was amazing. Displayed on the dome was a perfect 3D model of the Goddess's pockets. Each individual strut, beam, armor plate, and rivet was accounted for. It wasn't just a picture, but a full physical simulation of the ship. You could plot the course of, say, a meteor impact, and see exactly how it would deform and damage the entire vessel, down to the plumbing and electrical components. Now Samuel was slowly working backwards from the end result, a combination of the telescope data and pictures provided by Celia, to determine exactly what happened. As Samuel narrowed down the options, it helped inform Marin's own searches. Knowing the location of the epicenter narrowed down which cargoes might be involved, and knowing the size and number of blasts narrowed it further. Whatever had caused the blast, it had nothing to do with the ship itself. That ruled out a lot of possibilities. Marin could also appreciate Samuel for another reason. Watching him dance in his headset and gloves, building something wonderful in a completely imaginary world, was soothing in a very visceral way. They hadn't fucked or had sex or made love since that first time, but his presence was comforting in the wake of Ieng's death. The two males weren't all that similar, but Marin could appreciate the company. Though they rarely spoke to one another, just being in the same room working on the same problem helped. Sammy, on the other hand, was a mystery. They had embarked on an adventure to build something called a very cheap array, and a lot of pestering of Agent Celia resulted in what Marin suspected was some of that shocking waste of resources that she was officially looking for. The entire conference room had been converted into a clean room, and a wall had to be knocked out to fill it with the equipment they needed. Asking Sammy what they were doing just resulted in a dissertation on electron beam deposition and residual gas analysis. Equipment and supplies seemed to be delivered daily, and before bed the night before Sammy had mentioned that they had applied for another 2 patents. Apparently adding Shilvati tech to the work the tiny physicist had done before the Earth was folded into the Empire was having great results. The rhythmic beeping of an alarm took Marin's attention. Samuel reluctantly peeled off his headset, revealing bags under his eyes and sallow skin. She could tell he was burning himself out, and Marin promised herself that tonight she was going to pamper him and make sure he got a decent night's sleep. It's the least she could do. This thought was cemented into place when he stretched and she could hear what sounded like half his spine popping into place, followed by a huge yawn. He started talking before the yawn was finished and the first words came out a bit distorted. Well, time to take the briskets out of the smoker. The bitch will be here soon, and it's almost time for the status report. The rental vehicle sagged and sprung up as Agent Celia got out of it, a fact she noticed with a glare. She wasn't fat, damn it. There had to be something wrong with the suspension. The entire drive from Durango had been a bouncy nightmare and she barely fit in the human-made car. On top of that, the clerk at the rental office apparently knew the Sams and was asking after them, which meant he recognized her and knew where she was going. Not that it was a surprise. Apparently, she had gotten sloppy over the years. This whole project was her last hope at resolving mystery of the space station, which meant it was her last hope at saving her career. With all the evidence gone, it looked like the plan was to saddle Celia with one more failure, write her off as incompetent, and make sure she never had any real authority again. That was why she was clutching at the little hope she could get from a data jockey, a crazed physicist, and who she could only assume was some sort of super spy. Samuel still hadn't been open about what he did for a living prior to opening the observatory, only that he solved unusual problems and didn't do wet work. The mystery was a bit of a turn-on. Despite only being in their mid-30s by Earth reckoning, both Sams had been able to retire and open this museum purely on the backs of their accomplishments. It was almost humbling. The brand new palm scanner at the front door let her in after a beep, though her hand stung from touching the freezing metal, and Celia made her way to the kitchen, where she could already hear the industrious sounds of the table being set. Every time she had visited, aside from the first when she confiscated the telescope data, they had fed her. Samuel was apparently some sort of master chef on top of everything else, and Celia was mature enough to admit a little jealousy at Sammy and Marin for being able to live here with him and his wonderful cooking. The small male with his icy blue eyes and pale skin was quite the catch. When this was all over. No need to complicate things right now. Focus on the mission. As she walked in, Celia passed Sammy at the counter and was promptly handed a basket to put on the table. While Marin was always cool and Samuel was cautious, Sammy treated the agent like a guest. Even better since a few 100,000 credits worth of surplus lab equipment had made its way here. While she wasn't above buying loyalty, with Sammy it seemed to run deeper. If you treated them right, they treated you right. It was refreshingly straightforward. Just the sort of thing she could hope for in a potential future co-wife/husband/person. Co-spouse. With no preamble, Celia sat down at her regular seat and started filling her plate. Some sort of yellow coarse bread, roasted root vegetables, and a large slab of meat that had been seasoned, slow-cooked, and topped with a brown sauce. Samuel thunked a bottle of red Grail down in front of her, and after a moment of shuffling around everyone was seated around the table. Celia took a moment to give the room and its inhabitants a look over, noticing the pale skin and dark circles under the eyes of the tiny male. They really needed to take better care of him. Maybe she could arrange for a spa day for the two of them. No more distractions. Celia cleared her throat with 2 quick coughs into her hand before speaking. All right. Let's begin. Samuel took a swig from his bottle of cider, barely tasting it as he took a moment to collect his thoughts. Whenever he looked at Agent Celia, he could feel a little worm of panic twisting in his gut. Once she had left after her surprise visit and attack, the calm walls that Samuel put up during the crisis had fallen and he had broken down, trembling. He had almost been killed with a brutally casual disregard for his life, and needing Sammy and Marin to help calm him down and soothe the aftermath of that visit had been a blow to his ego. On every subsequent visit, Celia had been overly friendly towards him, even flirtatious. The thought of it turned his stomach, but Samuel wasn't about to reject her too overtly. The rogue interior agent was treating them well, but if she felt rebuffed that might turn bad very quickly. He could almost feel the crawling vice-like sensation of her fingers on his neck already. No, he had to play along until she got what she wanted, then hopefully he could slink away while Agent Celia basked in the adoration of her peers. That was the future. For now, he had a report to give. My model has answered a few of your questions. There was only one explosive event with a single source. Plastic deformation of the structural members are indicative of a large amount of energy coming from a small area. Celia leaned forward, leering at him with a grin. It made Samuel feel like he just walked through a spider web. That's fantastic work. Do you know how big the explosive was? About 300 gigajoules. Let's see you try to do the math on that one, you dumb cunt. After a momentary frown, Celia glossed over the number. How big is that? Like, if some of your terrorists used their homemade fertilizer explosives, how much would there be? 50 tons. Silence filled the room as every motion stopped. Finally, Celia spoke. That can't be right. Samuel shrugged. The explosive was in the armored hold used for high-value cargo. The shape of the chamber, combined with the uneven armor distribution, biased the explosion towards one side and vented it outwards, which is why there's still a ship at all. It acted like a giant claymore mine. Damage to the station was done primarily by the kinetic energy of chunks of the goddess's pockets hitting it like a shotgun blast from very close range. With vacuum between the ship and the station, there wasn't a shockwave to worry about. Nukes are weird in space. Nukes. As in a nuclear weapon. Now Celia looked like she was going to throw up. Unless you know how to stuff 50 tons of ammo into a room the size of moving van. More like the size of an end table. Attention turned toward Marin, and she could see Samuel sag in relief as Celia was diverted. Days she visited were always hard on the little guy. It didn't help that they always went out of their way to make sure the bitch had a good dinner. When the agent wasn't visiting, they lived on microwave noodles, junk food, and instant meals. Pretty soon they were all going to associate delicious slow-cooked barbecue with that horrible woman. The cargo manifest has some irregularities. Most of it is normal, and the regular customs checks come back clean. What is unusual is one crate, measuring 3/4 of a meter square. It was listed as containing cultural artifacts purchased by the Chulza family and weighed about 32 kilograms. Cultural artifacts. There has been a push lately from museums who want to be able to show off authentic human culture. You know how trendy our newest species is. There's a lot of money to be made and nearly every noble family has been getting involved in some way. Let's skip the lessons and just have you tell me what made this box so special. As you have probably noticed, I am not a patient woman. Marin sighed. One of the scales used at an on-planet customs check that the box supposedly went through is slightly out of calibration. It weighs pretty much everything about 6 grams light, except this box. According to the logs at the customs office, it never had any variation during each weigh-in along its journey. And what does that mean? You're the interior agent. You figure it out. Celia's eyes seemed to flash in anger at Marin's flippant response. You're only involved in this because I let you be, Marine. Don't forget it. Right. That and Celia was so dumb she couldn't find her tits with both hands and a mirror. Marin sighed. It means someone was manually editing the customs database to hide the true weight of the box. Unfortunately, there's no way to know if that was done during transport or after the fact. And where did this box come from? Celia seemed positively delighted to have a lead, so it was time to shoot her down. If it wasn't for the fact that this was Marin's only lead on Ieng's death, it would almost be fun. I haven't been able to track it yet. There were a lot of transfers groundside and some conflicting paperwork in the system. Intentional. Definitely. Well, keep working on it. Celia dismissed Marin with a flick of her fingers and turned towards Sammy for their report. Goddess, that woman was infuriating. Every time she spoke, Marin regretted not shooting her weeks ago. Sammy put on their best fake smile. It bothered Sam and Marin with how well they treated the interior agent, but they also both knew how Sammy really felt. This whole charade just served to hopefully keep their family out of trouble and help Marin learn the truth about her husband. Celia could go fuck herself with a rusty flagpole. The new optical coatings I've developed will increase the light transmission of the very cheap array by 16% over the best human build designs and 1.8% over commercial shill offerings. Less than 2%. Celia frowned, eyebrows furrowing over narrowed dark eyes. I took a huge risk getting you that equipment. I expected better results. Sammy raised an eyebrow and tilted their head. 1.8% was enough for 2 patents and a tentative offer to give a lecture at a university on your home world. 1.8% is unprecedented. I would have been happy with 1%. 1.8 is huge. The bulky woman crossed her arms and put on an ingratiating smile. Whatever you say. I'm still unhappy that you are letting other people know about your work. It's a big security risk. You knew the terms when I agreed to do the work. You aren't paying us and we will need the extra income to keep the lights on while we do your job. Sammy smiled pleasantly on the outside, trying not to let the nervousness show. If Celia decided it was too much of a risk, what steps would she take to silence the team? True. I just wasn't expecting such noticeable results. Sammy's new smile was more genuine. The more noticeable the results, the more well-known Sammy got, the safer Samuel and the rest of them would be from this horrible monster of a woman. Notoriety would be their shield. The telescopes are on the way along with the servos for the refit. After that I can start polishing and recoating mirrors. How much space will we have? Celia shrugged. It depends on what's available for me to grab when the time comes. Likely a courier ship of some kind. Sammy tried to make sure that their sigh sounded more theatrical than genuine. Celia, if I don't know how much space we have to work with, Samuel and I won't be able to design the frames. Please let us know as soon as you can. At least some likely options. I'll see what I can do. With that, Sammy's portion of the show and tell was over. Even though it was still too early for real results, Agent Celia was overjoyed with the progress her little team had made. Even the goddess-damned winter chill couldn't dampen her spirits as she climbed into the battered rental and started the engine. When she had the idea of using these three, her expectations were low. Marin was the only one she expected to actually be useful, but it was clear that the woman was attached to the two humans and keeping them in the loop would just make Marin more tractable. Instead, she had a three-pronged approach that was making real progress. Marin had given Celia an idea of the dimensions of the explosive, while Samuel had given her the power. With that, she could use her intelligence connections to get an idea of exactly what sort of device was used. Once Marin could tell her where it had come from, Celia would be able to do some detective work of her own and get the all credit. The very cheap array was another story altogether. Sammy's idea of simply recollecting the missing data was easily the most personally risky for Celia, considering how many accounting mistakes added up to give Sammy all of the equipment for their research. Still, it wasn't her money, and if they had real results all would be forgiven. If not, well, she'd just pin everything on Marin and Sammy somehow, then swoop in to rescue Samuel from poverty. It was win-win.
End of chapter. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss any episode and do all the other YouTube stuff. Visit and support the author, and I'll see you next time. If you didn't enjoy, comment on what I can do better. And as usual, have a wonderful day.